Hey, David, how are you, man?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, up your ass always, and always add a minimum of over a billion people, over 100 million, whatever number it is for you that makes the hair stand up on your arms. Your long-term objectives should be frightening to everyone, especially you. But eventually people that laugh at you, scoff at you, and make fun of you, eventually they applaud you. And I appreciate your applause and your support.
I love it. No, that's such a great lesson. And it's when I was younger and I learned about just speaking about goals real quick. I remember there was a formula that involves the attainable aspect, and that you don't want to make them too outrageous to where your brain goes, well, that's never going to happen, and then gives up. But then there's the whole big hairy goal. Who came up with that concept? The big scary hairy goals. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Audacious. Yeah, the big audacious.
Audacious.
The Bodag or whatever they called it. Yeah.
Yeah, Bodak, right. Whoever that was, I'm more on that camp because right, it's like, well, you got to shoot big, and when you look at the people that have just hit it out of the park, that have absolutely destroyed it, there's no way that they in the beginning may have even thought that that was possible, but at some point they started to believe, and I'm sure they set their goals based on that. So the sky is the limit. So, get it going. Well, why limit yourself? And like you said, people are going to go, okay, sure, 1 billion people, but then you actually do it, and it's like, what's up, y'all?
Like creating a private rocket ship to the moon or whatever else is out there. What's so interesting is that people, although they may even be able to have these long and midterm objectives that are unrealistic, they forget the most important part, that that's just a trajectory for me and for others, that unless you're willing to go the empty mile, unless you're willing to go the extra mile every day, unless you're willing to enjoy the consistent, everyday, persistent, without quit pursuit of that audacious objective, unless you're willing to have realistic discipline, realistic strategy and awareness, that you will not effectuate your participation in that dream. And so I always say, dream so big that it terrifies you, but make sure what you're doing today is realistic.
I love that. That's a nice combination of kind of what I was saying. So let's dive into that a little bit, right? Because you're obviously somebody who you're not only talking the talk, you've walked the walk, and you've had that success, and you've hit it out of the park. So how do you go from A to B? And what is your system? What is your strategy for, like you said, it's like, okay, you can have a goal that's insane to most people, but if you just take those baby steps day by day and have realistic goals that you can kind of keep you focused one step at a time, then as you said, that's how I do it too. That's how you're going to get there. What is your system for that?
I have 5 daily practices, and I'd love to share them with everyone. And feel free, reach out to me if you want them. DM me at David Meltzer, my name, or david@dmeltzer.com. These are the magic 5 daily practices. So these are to be done every day. Number 1, what do you want? What do you want according to the midterm unrealistic and the long-term super unrealistic objectives that you think you want? Because you have to have an open mind to learn from what happens today so that you can change the midterm and long-term objectives according to what you learned today. But you're not going to learn anything today unless you know what you want today. Personally, what do I want? Experientially, what do I want? Giving-wise, what do I want? And receiving. Remember, you can't get what you don't have. You got to receive. So personal, experientially, and receiving. 2, once you
hold on. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to pause there because you said something that's like super important that a lot of people just skip over, which is what do you want and what do you really want? Like, and I think it's important to note that what people think that they want is just leading to this life of miswanting and chasing the things that make them unhappy, right? So you kind of got into the details of what you really want.
Most people want what other people want, what's missing or what they don't have. And then they end up with what other people want, what's missing and what they don't have. And if you know what you want, then what happens is you have this nothingness that everybody else lives in, and you now have a possibility for the day. You have now created a possibility for the day, a mathematical advantage over most people's procrastination and overwhelmness into an area of, okay, This is what I want. This is what's possible today. Realistically, not unrealistically like in the future, but realistically, this is what I want today and this is possible. Now I ask myself, number 2 for a daily practice, who can I help with what I want? That always accelerates getting what we want. And also, who can help me get what I want? Fastest way to get to where you want to be is ask someone that's already there for directions. Once you know who you can help and who can help you, my prayer every day in the morning is may God put at least 10 people in front of me that I can help, and may God put at least 10 people in front of me that can help me. Why? Because if I know my possibility, my what for the day, I now increase my mathematical, realistic, pragmatic success of today to take it to a probability. Why? Because once we know the who, connected to the what, we're inspired, we're in spirit, we're connected to and through the great, omniscient, all-powerful source that loves me more than my mom, something bigger than me that's protecting and promoting me, not punishing me. So critical, what you know your what and your who, then you can deal with the how. Understanding how is utilizing activity. The one reason
this is number 3.
Number 3, know your how.
Yeah.
Know your how. The reason today's so realistic is today is the only day that the man-made construct of time applies to. Meaning you have 24 hours today to be as active, productive, accessible, and gracious as you can, to consistently and persistently pursue your potential according to what you think you want in the future. Remember, the future is relative and the past is relative, but today is pragmatic. It's man-made. So we want to live in the context of how can I be productive, accessible, and gracious? I even reconcile time with gratitude. What do I mean by that? I know that there's light, love, and lessons in everything. Activity I planned, activity I don't have planned. There's light, love, and lessons in activity I get paid for, activity I don't get paid for. It's all activity. And so what I do is I reconcile time and say to myself, is it worth my time to talk to Will, to find the light, the love, and the lessons in him and his audience today? How many minutes of time is it worth relative to everything else? So I use time for my how. And one of the things that people ignore also is their sleep. Sleep is an activity. It's an activity of recovery and accessibility, meaning you're accessing information when you sleep if you can get the negativity out of your way. So what I do is I have an unwinding routine. My tomorrow starts today by putting my body, my mind, my soul in a position of recovery and accessibility. I study my sleep. I have mentorship for my sleep. So all of these activities determine my how. Then once I know my what, my who, and my how, step number 4, know your now. What does that mean? You learn to prioritize what's important to you of activity you have planned and you don't have planned in your sleep. What's important to you, not what's urgent. Urgency is a subset of importance. If you know your what, your who, and your how, you will not only be able to prioritize your day, which is the antidote to procrastination, antidote to feeling overwhelmed, which is where most people live in the world of nothingness. Now you have possibility, probability. Once we prioritize by what's important to us, we can step number 5, apply our why. We can apply the why. Once we apply the why, we determine that instead of getting more healthy today, more happy today, more wealthy today, more worthy today, we are already happy, healthy, wealthy, and worthy. We're just figuring out what we're doing to interfere with it. We're applying our why. We're not in search of something we already have. We already are connected to and through something bigger than us that loves us this much. We have to figure out what we're doing to interfere with it. So step number 5 is to apply our why by number 1, identifying fear, ego-based consciousness. And for me, they show up as this: a need to be right, a need to be offended, a need to be separate, a need to be inferior, a need to be superior, a need to be angry, upset, anxious, frustrated, a need to worry, a need to complain. Worrying and complaining are the worst because not only are they interfering with your potential, but they're wishing for what you don't want. They're creating more nothingness for yourself. So if you learn to identify these needs of the ego, If you learn to identify what you're doing to interfere with your happiness, your health, your wealth, and your worthiness, instead of resisting it, fighting it, going over it, under it, through it, around it, overselling it, back end selling it, lying to it, manipulating and cheating it, to move in the wrong direction, to create more void, shortages, and obstacles, simply stop. Breathe through your nose, out through your mouth. Remind, remember, and recollect. What do you think you're reminding to, remembering with, recollecting from? And what do you do then? Once you remind, remember, and recollect, then roll in the right direction, not accelerate in the wrong direction. Don't create void, shortages, and obstacles. Make every mistake, pain, failure, and setback a lesson, knowing you're being protected and promoted, and roll into what you want, who you can help, who can help you, how best to get it done, and prioritize by what's important to you, not what's important to other people, what's missing or you don't have, and live your life in your why, inspired with intellect and intuition, creating efficiency, effectiveness, and statistical success, allowing you to make more money, help more people, and have more fun.
Well, there it is, folks. David, great talking to you. That was excellent. I mean, that's all of it, right? A lot to unpack, and for your average ADD human being, such as myself, you're going to want to break those down a little bit, because there's no way anybody's going to hear that and just go do all those. So let's get into those.
That's why you want them also to watch the replay of this as well, right? We want people to rewatch your replay that you post, because it's going to take repetitive practice. I'm also, like I said, I'm willing to give you the guide to it so you can practice, but let's unpack it some.
Yeah, let's unpack it. And you're exactly right. I mean, right. At the end of the day, habits are something that I feel basically our world revolves around, and I'm always preaching, and everything you have in here comes down, in my opinion, to the habits that you have. And so, right, it's like you can want these things, and you can look at these things and go, oh yeah, just like a New Year's resolution, and say, that's it. That makes so much sense. I'm going to change my life, until 5 seconds later, when you scroll through Instagram and see a dancing monkey and go, oh no, that's funny. And then you forget about all the other stuff, right? So we gotta get into breaking it down, and how are we gonna make these habits? Okay, so one thing before I forget, that you had a number 5. Did you have an actual acronym for when you were talking about the remind, remember, recollect, roll in the right direction?
Yeah, so what I always say is, when you can identify these needs that separate us, your mind, your body, and soul are on fire. So everybody knows, when you feel on fire, regardless of whether you can identify why, the best thing you can do is stop, drop, and roll.
Stop, drop, and roll. That's what it was. Stop, drop, roll. I'm taking notes on this. And this is what I love about universal principles. And that word, I feel like, has lost a lot of its luster over time. And let me ask you this, David. So a lot of this stuff you're saying, to me, I guess there's different ways to word it, but I call them universal principles. And what I mean by that are these total truths that in my life I've read multiple times, heard multiple times, and oftentimes, preferably, have experienced it in my own life, so that I'm like, yep, I can hang my hat on that one. Like, that's something that there's different ways to skin the cat, but that particular principle that I just heard, and if I live my life around that and I develop my habits around that, is pretty much guaranteed to build my momentum and my happiness. And the exact opposite is true. If I ignore that principle, and just like these five practices of yours, they're all principles. And it's sort of like, if you ignore them, then you're going to lose that momentum and you're going to be unhappy. It's as simple as that. Yet people, we choose to ignore them every day, and we focus on these other things that don't make us happy. So it's funny, the stop, drop, and roll, for me, I have a similar acronym. I actually use it every single morning. Or not every single morning, but throughout the day. It's a habit that I've gotten in doing, which is called CBRP, which is not as fun as the stop, drop, and roll, but it's catch yourself. So when you have a negative thought, something bad happens, a failure, you catch it, you take a step back, you breathe, B is for breathe, and you go, okay, all right, what's really happening here, right? Versus getting caught up and getting all pissed off and dwelling and being like, my life sucks, I'm stupid, I'm never going to make. Then you remind and reflect. I didn't have the recollect part, but I like that as well. Remind and reflect, like, okay, like, what do I have going for me? Like, what am I grateful for? Like, what is this? And then what does this really mean in the greater scheme of things that this just happened? Is this like, am I going to even remember this tomorrow? Right. So it's kind of putting into perspective, reminding yourself you've got everything to overcome this and push through this. And then the P is for pivot, which is like, all right, take that action. Like, what can I actually do? You know, and if there's nothing you can do about that particular thing that happened, maybe it's something that's completely out of your control. What can you take action on that will make you happy and that will, you know, give you that feeling that you're after versus, you know, that dwelling?
Exactly the same. And that's why we have so many different frequencies helping to articulate with different vernacular and vocabulary,
Right.
How best to do these ultimate truths, right? We want to, what are we both saying? We're saying, get out of your effing way, right? And how many times we heard that? How many times have we heard it in your life? Get out of your own way.
That's the universal principle, right? That's the underlying universal principle. Get out of your effing way. How do you do that? Whatever works for you, right? I have mine. You've got yours. You're going to teach people yours. I'm going to teach
the same thing. We're talking about the same activity. We just
same thing.
Different words.
That's both, exactly right.
We're both stop dropping and whirling and CBR being whatever. We're both doing the exact same thing, but it's so important for people like you and I to promote each other, because it's not what I say, it's what people hear. And I have a philosophy is that, you know, look, 10% of the people will always be on your frequency. 80% can adjust and tune into your frequency, and 10% of the people approximately will never be on your frequency. So you're like fingernails on a chalkboard. They're just never going to like you. They're going to be resistant to everything you say. So it's the more people we have saying the same things, the better the frequency spectrum will be, the more the universal laws will be shared, the more we can create the collective consciousness will help us all, instead of separating ourselves when people don't understand what we're saying because we're not saying it the way they can hear it.
I love how you put that. And right, you know, that's kind of like somebody like you and somebody like me, like we have the same basic mission goal to just make this planet better, to leave a legacy and leave it better than we came in on. And, you know, it's funny how it tends to take success a lot of times for people to realize that, unfortunately. I know you've had, and when I say success, I mean financial success. I have as well. I built and sold a company, and I obviously your resume speaks for itself. One of my goals is to help people get there, even if they haven't gotten that. Because for me, and I don't know about how it worked for you, like I've been doing personal development and wellness stuff for a very long time. And by the time I sold my company, I kind of knew what was happening, but it was neat to see it happen in real time. And for me, it was, holy cow, this feels amazing. Like, there's no disputing that it was one of the best feelings, like to start something from incubation where, you know, you're working out of your mom's basement to selling, you know, for me, it was selling a company for millions of dollars. There's no better feeling. Right. And so I'm not trying to take that away, but here's the deal. Here's the rub. That only lasted for like a few weeks. Right. And then I was bored and I was like, now what? Right. And people tend to convince themselves, kind of like we talked earlier at the beginning of this conversation, these miswantings, that if they could only this, if they could only that, like if only I got $1 million, then I'd be happy. Right. But that's not how life works. It's about always growing. And if you're not continually setting goals and growing, it actually doesn't matter how big that goal is. As long as you're continuing to grow and hit your goals, you're going to be happy. Right. I mean, great if you can make $1 billion or reach 1 billion people. But if you have goals and you're hitting them, to me, that's happiness. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And I think, you know, I'm a sports guy, you know, running Leigh Steinberg, made the movie Jerry Maguire about our firm. I always say the W's are temporary, right? I mean, if you look at just as short as the Final Four, even sports fan, if you ask them, you know, in March, who won the Final Four, most people forgot already. It's temporary. The wins are temporary. Even making $100 million to me was temporary. If you attach your emotions to an outcome, you're not going to remain happy. Where the happiness lies is in the L column, the lessons column, because the lessons have the value. All win columns are proof that you're executing on the L column, right? The W column to me is just proof that I'm now confirming what I've learned. Right. That's
I like that.
And that's why it doesn't last, because confirmation right, doesn't last as long as the learning. The learning is what is the enjoyment of the pursuit, right? The learning is the pursuit. It's fun to learn, right? And it's fun to be able to execute on what we've learned. But the execution itself is temporary. And if you put all your emotional attachment onto that outcome, see, the biggest misuse of time, so time is defined by the distance between cause and effect. That's how we determine time. There's pragmatic time that you can use a clock or a calendar, but there's also relative time. And when we're doing things the right way, we look backwards and say, wow, that went fast. Or when we get there, we're like, whoa, I can't believe how fast that was. And those people that put their attention on the outcome and say, oh, I can't wait till I get there, I'm going to be happy when I get there. Are we there yet? Even if they get there, even if they're able to confirm the lessons they learned in the journey or the trip, they're still there going, oh, that took forever. That sucked. Even if they won, right? Even if they won. Right? No happiness.
That's exactly right. It's the same principle with gambling, where we actually, it's been proven. When they hook these things up to our brains, that we're happier, and where we're really getting our kicks and those dopamine hits is the anticipation of the win. And then when we actually win, it goes way down. Yeah, this was great, David. No worries. I guess I'll just end with, since we kind of talked about habits, what is your top habit that you feel like you've developed personally that's helped you to get to where you are and is continuing to help you build that growth and momentum?
My best habit is ask for help. It instantly takes everything into the momentum. So my greatest habit is radical humility. I display radical humility by asking for help. The fastest and easiest way to get what I want, where I want, and how I want it is to find someone that's already there and ask them for help. So I encourage everyone, the habit machine will be formed on the ability to ask for help. There's no better way to be happy than to ask for help. Most people have the intention to give away what they receive anyway. And so by asking for help, it's the great accelerant, expansive way of living life, of being a part of the whole. So by far, my greatest habit is to ask for help. The greatest legacy I want to leave is to be kind to my future self by doing good deeds with all that I've received from all the help that I've been given. And Will, man, thank you so much for doing this.
Well done. Yeah, man.
I'll come back.
For sure. Thank you so much, David. Talk soon, buddy. Good stuff.
Talk soon. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
That's it for the 5 Core Life. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button on this video and pound that subscribe button so you get notified when new episodes drop. Also, please fill out the free 5 Core Life Evaluator quiz. It's a great way to get a baseline of where you are in the 5 cores and which of the 5 cores you need support. In addition, you'll get some actionable advice that you can apply and start improving your life in the areas that you need it most. That's it for today's episode of the 5 Core Life Podcast. Have a wonderful day.
Get moving. Gain momentum. Join the movement. Join Emmett by going to moremomentum.com to take a free life evaluator quiz on where you currently stand in each of your 5 cores.